I'm sick of hearing, right, that modern Western civilization is a mixed economy. A mixed economy between socialism and capitalism. It's not. And this is another symptom of us failing to understand what things are, starting from what's fundamentally physically true about them. Okay, a mixed economy is when you have more than one means of trading for and producing goods and services. The feudal system is a prime example of a mixed economy, because back then you had both the physical practice of bartering goods for goods, but you also had the practice of bartering goods for coins. The times of slavery is another decent example, because there was both the physical practice of bartering goods for currency, but you had the unpaid labor or indentured servitude producing some of those goods. Under modern day economics, however, even though we still allow trading goods for goods, we don't fundamentally rely on this process like the feudal times did. And of course, slavery is abolished. So nowadays, we just fundamentally rely on exchanging money for goods. Modern society is a singular capitalist economy, whereas the feudal times were a mixed capitalist economy. Socialists are just trying to make their nonsense ideology more appealing by wrongfully taking credit for state-funded programs that have been in practice since before socialism existed. Programs that are only possible because of capitalism. Because capitalism is a method and incentive for running an economy that produces things. Fundamentally based on exchanging property held in common value for property one holds in higher personal value, which all can include one's own labor, because we own our own bodies. They are property in this respect. This is something that's been practiced and has been evolving since ancient times. Whereas socialism produces nothing. It only demands to be given stuff for free. And it's an idea that came about specifically 3 centuries ago when some people decided they didn't want to have to work to live in the lap of luxury. Okay, now I'll get into the extended version of this video, giving the nuance behind my reasoning for those wanting more information. And I know everything I just said contradicts what you can find in a Google search, and probably the bullshit you were taught in economics too. It's wrong. It's all wrong, and we can go through why. Okay, so let's look at some of the definitions Google can provide us. What do we get when we look at what a mixed economy is? Very different to what I say constitutes a mixed economy. Apparently, this is a system where government and businesses operate side by side, where the government has regulations in place, primarily in the form of taxes, that are then utilized to provide social benefits like healthcare and roads. Okay, now, will anyone care to tell me of a time in history where this wasn't how an economy functioned? Because the only time I can think of was the Stone Age, before the concept of money existed. Okay, this is a false definition of a mixed economy, because it serves no purpose but to give legitimacy to socialism. It has no practical truth behind it, knowing that this definition describes every economy that has existed since the formation of governance over society. Now, what I think, right, is if you're going to have a definition for something like a mixed economy, it has to be identifying something in how it physically operates as distinct from any other type of economy. Government regulation and taxation has existed in every civilization throughout history. They're not distinct from each other in this way. But the physical practice of bartering goods for goods and the practice of bartering goods for money are clearly 2 different forms of running an economy. And when you have them both happening in the same economy, like we did in the feudal era, That's what I would call a mixed economy. Government regulation is just a given. Except for maybe in like the hypothetical anarchist society, where the ideal goal achieved is individual self-sufficiency, completely divorced from government existence, let alone oversight. Now, when I look up what a singular economy is, this is what I got. It's an abstract idea, apparently, purely hypothetical, and hasn't existed in a tangible form that could be used to describe anything we're doing right now. No, it's something to look forward to in the future, it seems, where all economies are operated under a global unified ideal. Seriously, this is the curse of having the subject of philosophy dominated by a bunch of quack socialists. This is dumb. It doesn't describe what your economy physically is, or what kind of bartering system it uses, or what its mediums of exchange or modes of production are. I find a better use of the term singular economy is to point out that there is a single or primary medium or currency of which everything is traded. That is something that can be used to describe our current reality. I mean, to me, if you're going to understand economics, right, we have to be able to pin down things that are fundamentally true. Things that are happening for us in society right now. But what I'm seeing is we're operating on assumptions of a system we've just taken for granted, but never properly understood. And people criticize it. Socialists criticize it based on these assumptions of a system we've taken for granted, but never properly understood. But okay, I'm rambling, so let's look at some others. A market economy. An economy where trading and production is done through individual consumers and businesses with private ownership and minimal government involvement. And this is pretty much what we have now, but it's just as faulty as a definition of a mixed economy because, again, when is this not the case with an economy? For an economy to exist requires there to be businesses and individuals buying and selling property they own to each other in a market. This was practiced back when all we had was the barter system. So I don't get it. How is this distinct from any other time in history or any other means of running an economy? And there is one, but we'll get to that in a second. Next up is a traditional economy, where the production and trade is centered around customs, beliefs, and traditions. Its primary medium of exchange is bartering goods for goods instead of money, and it relies on hunting, fishing, and agriculture, which basically describes pre-Middle Age societies, especially the Stone Age, when it was first developing into organized societies with trading as a regular part of their day. It wasn't long after this, of course, that we started working with metals, and the concept of nations and governance really started to take shape, which some of you might recognize as the Copper and Bronze Ages. The only problem I find with this definition is its opposite would be what? Well, a currency-based economy, and the production of goods is done in an organized business structure. An artificial economy, perhaps, where you have manufacturing as the dominant form of production instead of hunting, which is also pretty much how we're doing things now. And according to my logic, both of these things are singular economies. because they both have a primary medium of exchange they use for most, if not all, of their trading. The traditional economy relies on bartering goods for goods, and the artificial economy relies on trading goods for money. So maybe I could say our current society is a singular artificial market economy. We have a single primary means and currency of trading for most, if not all, goods and services, and it's supported overwhelmingly by manufacturing and mass production of goods. Just throwing that out there. But from what I can see, a traditional economy is the only one so far that is distinct from the others. That is a way an economy can and has functioned, and it still works with my redefining of terms. But now we'll get into the last type of economy that is currently recognized. A command economy, where the government controls the production and distribution of wealth and goods, ultimately meaning the government also controls who gets to have property and who doesn't. This is an accurate definition and terminology for a type of economy that is distinct from the others, and is also a type of an economy that has existed a number of times in recent generations. This describes the economies of every communist socialist dictatorship history has endured thus far. And it is also what happened under the National Socialist dictatorship in Germany. But that one was targeted against specific people rather than everybody in the country. But there it is. Of all the Google-defined terms, traditional and command economies are the only ones with their own distinct function, different to how other economies function in general. Google's idea of mixed market economies are defined by aspects that are just a given in any economy. So, can you see why I disagree with these definitions? And why I have the nerve to suggest a more applicable terminology for this stuff? And this is all more important when we try to understand what capitalism is. How it even came to exist in the first place. Because no one invented it. The idea evolved from things we've been doing since the Stone Age. It's not a system of any kind, it's an evolved methodology. A method based on and beginning with the practice of trading. It's the foundation for how any economic system can possibly work. And it's what I summarized as exchanging a thing of common value for something of higher personal value or labor. And it hinges on people having property rights because in order to exchange a thing of common value for a thing of higher value, you need to own them. And that thing of common value can be anything to you. It can be money. It can be food, or another item altogether, or it could be your own body or labor. You can exchange these things for something more important to you, such as money for food, or food for money in the case of grocery stores and restaurants. It can be your body and your labor in exchange for money, as is the case with every employee. Then there's investments where you place money down in the hope for future returns. I don't know why my nose is so itchy today. No, it's just itchy. There's no reason behind it. Don't even try thinking of that. But the only reason why capitalism revolves around money is because we did something rather miraculous in early civilization. We realized everybody likes shiny metals. Likes them enough to want to possess them, but also remain willing to trade them for something more important. We also understood the concept of value, as we had been trading goods and services for goods and services long before the innovation of money. What we know as the barter system. Value, which is fundamentally based on what we need or want, in contrast with what we don't need or want, and what we're willing to sacrifice for those things. So we started smelting and hammering down shiny metals into tokens, to offer them to others who might be willing to exchange something they have that another wants or needs for those tokens. then those people realized they could do the same thing with those now exchanged tokens, and the idea took off like wildfire. Or at least this is hypothetically how we can deduce what happened. This happened so long ago no one knows who started it, and more than one civilization did it. In this way, the token of common value can be anything. It can be paper notes or even plastic chips. Even digital numbers on a screen. As long as we're willing to agree to its exchangeability of common value. But because of this innovation, we turned money into a thing that everybody can hold in common value to easily and fairly exchange for other things more important to them. Money is the great equalizer. Money is a wonderful idea and is overall a good thing that has made our lives better tenfold. It's not the root of all evil like that stupid saying goes, and it's another thing I wish people would stop saying. I mean, you don't have to hunt for your own food anymore. You can waltz down to the store and purchase it. You don't have to find your own safe source of water to drink. You can just buy it in packaged bottles and take it with you to a destination. Or pay to have a running system to your home. There's lots of things that went into making these things possible, but they all depended on the innovation of money. Now, socialism is not an economic system, nor is it a method for running an economy. It's an ideology for how an already functioning economy should be managed and reorganized for the socialists' benefit, specifically in the fashion of being provided with what the socialist thinks people need and don't need, what the socialist says people need and don't need, without necessarily having to work for it, and relinquishing people of the right to individual property and having instead collective property. Collective property ultimately resulting in the state basically owning everything and you owning nothing. And just hoping that the state can distribute everything we want and need fairly and adequately. You know, instead of just letting us decide for ourselves what we want and need. The command economy we identified before. Socialists only like the idea of state-funded programs because that falls into line with their idealism of not having to work for what they want or need. It falls into line with their idealism of providing everyone with their basic needs. State-funded programs, however, are not socialism. They are in fact an affectation of capitalism. Okay, the funding of our roads and our police forces, for example, is something that's been practiced for thousands of years, before socialism was conceived. Even our healthcare. Okay, it is the state exchanging something of common value for something more important. The state's job is to maintain civilization, and the idea behind civilization is to have a place to call our own that assures our safety, our ability to live our lives on our own terms, and a place that we can belong. And this is also, of course, more specifically, the point of a nation and a culture. But both these things exist because of and work in tandem with civilization. And civilization is just us cooperating with each other for mutual benefit. That's what it is fundamentally. Hence the understanding behind the word civility. But I digress. As for taxes, they have existed for as long as capitalism has been in development. That's another thing I can't stand. People say taxes are socialism or taxes are theft. But they're not. Both of these claims are wrong. Taxes are a condition of living in and maintaining civilization. They are an ancient idea, literally practiced as early as ancient Egyptian times. They categorically cannot be socialist. Taxes are taken by the threat of legal prosecution because there are lots of people who think they can expect civilization to just keep running without them having to make any financial contribution to keeping it running. I always say this, okay? if you can propose an idea of how civilization can be maintained without taxes, I'm all for it. Okay, I'm even trying to think of a way this could work. If I knew a way it could be done, I'd be presenting it to you now, rather than telling you taxes are a condition of maintaining civilization. And right now, the best I've got, and I really don't want to put this out there because it's not an idea that I've thought through enough to actually be confident to get behind yet. But right now, the best I've got is voluntary private contributions and organized business projects, where everything the state currently funds is instead funded by voluntary donations or is its own business, and either everyone gets behind that business or rich people just stay on top of offering all the services we need without necessarily waiting for a demand. Now that would actually be an appropriate definition of a market economy. No state involvement at all. Just pure anarcho-capitalism. Like, there is no reason why you can't have a business based on building and maintaining roads. The problem is who's going to pay for it? I mean, if you can think of the expenses needed to pay for workers to build a house for you, think of getting them to build a road for you between where you are and all the places you need to go. The average person doesn't have this kind of money, even on just the maintenance of the roads alone. Perhaps you could have communities of people agree to chip in to get a project done, but then that might as well be the state doing that, rather than going through the extra effort of rallying people together behind a single project, on top of the other stuff you have to get done in your life. Maybe we need an anarcho-capitalist in here. If there's by chance anyone who's an anarcho-capitalist in the audience, they're actually a rare thing to come across. Just to tell me what I'm not thinking of. Because ultimately, it does seem a little simpler and easier to have the state do all this stuff with a broad collection of small amounts of money from an entire population of people. This to me shows state funding is a streamlining of our access to services, which is still trading a thing of common value for something of higher value. Okay, it's still capitalism, but it's coming from the government's side of things. And yes, it's not voluntary, it's a legal obligation. Taxes are an investment in ourselves in the hope of future returns. In this way, it makes a sort of sense why socialists think you can just tax society into prosperity. It doesn't work because they don't understand someone has to be providing that wealth. Someone has to be working for it. Most of us have to be, actually. And ultimately, you still have to build and maintain your own success. I mean, we may be all working to contribute to the function of a machine, but this machine doesn't just run on its own. You've got to actively be partaking in it. And on top of this, if you tax everyone to death, you won't have growth. Or maybe they do understand all this stuff, but just quietly. They're just quietly hoping to be at the top of this schema, to be masters attended to by slaves. But the lack of growth is why governments don't tax us to death already. It's not just because we'll get really angry if they did, but it's very simple math to calculate. If you take most people's money that they need to manage to grow and develop in their own lives, they'll be too poor to get anywhere further in life where they can make even more money for you to tax. And it's the same with businesses. You want businesses to grow so that they make more money, because that will mean more tax revenue. You don't need to take more money from the rich. You just need rich people to make more money to give. But that's something socialists don't understand because they hate rich people. Which is also another example of socialism being an ideology rather than a method of any kind. And so it doesn't deserve the credibility of being a part of the current operations of our economy. Methods are based on producing a physical outcome. Ideas are not. A method may originate from an idea, but an idea can be based entirely on feelings and fail to be actionable in reality. And socialism is an idea based on a disposition against the rich, against meritocracy, and in effect against any hierarchy outside of its own. Which is also why socialists hate monarchies and push for democracy. After all, a monarch is both rich and sitting in a position of authority above the socialist, and is living the socialist's dream of being given wealth and servitude from other people. But we're getting to the end of pretty much all I wanted to say on this. And yes, I know, I do have to make that video on why democracy was a bad idea, and we should have maintained a monarchy. And a bunch of other videos I've promised. I'll get to them in due time, which is when I say so. Anyway, I've made my case. The current definitions of economies are wrong. I say a mixed economy is where your society as a whole depends on more than just one physical thing of common value to conduct its trading and producing of goods, creating multiple markets or multiple facets to a market. A singular economy is where there is one physical thing of common value of which most, if not all, trade and production is done. Our economy is singular, as we primarily rely on money alone. And none of this has anything to do with whether or not socialism has infected your society. Socialism didn't invent healthcare. It didn't build our roads, and it's not responsible for funding them. Okay, the long ancient practice of taxation is what's funding them. Socialism is nothing more than an ideological sickness born from a lack of understanding of how capitalism works and a jealousy that some people are more successful than others. But with all this said, because I'm nobody, my word here is not law. So if you agree with the logic behind my definitions and want to speak with others using them, be prepared to have others correct you with the current established definitions and having to explain why they're wrong. Otherwise, let me know what you think. Which is more sensible? Describing a mixed economy as capitalism and socialism somehow working together, thereby basically calling the very concept of government to be socialism itself, and also thereby giving socialism a credibility and authority over you that it doesn't deserve? Or is a mixed economy a kind of capitalism, where your society is dependent on more than one form of trading in order to make the economy run? And the government aspect is just a given, because governments exist in the first place to help civilizations function. And socialism has nothing to do with that process, and never has, since socialism is an idea that was born like 3 centuries ago. I don't know. This is what makes sense to me. Alright. Look, that's it for today's episode. I'm scathing just on 30 minutes. Maybe I can cut that down a bit more. But yeah, I guess I'll catch you all around in the next one. Thanks for watching, and please do have an auspicious day. I've always wanted to say that. Auspicious. It means conducive to success. Please do have a day that is conducive to success. All right, I'm out of here.